While we get our mics exchanged, thank you, Walter. You know, one of the things that I really enjoy, not only being a storyteller, but also listening to the stories of other people, is how it broadens my own experience. You know, I've never been to Alaska, and maybe never will go, but just for these few moments, I was there. I can see Walter and Timothy sitting on top of that building. I can see that land bridge. I can even have a slight peek into what happened millions of years ago, all through someone else's eyes and through someone else's experience. When we share our stories, we not only change ourselves, we change our listeners. Our next storyteller, Evangeline Woods, has a family history in Milledgeville that's quite amazing. Van is accomplished in her own right. Yes, she is. She is. And Van is one of those people, whenever I see her, she always looks like she just stepped out of a bandbox. I mean, just always beautifully, beautifully dressed. And she always says the same thing, oh, I just threw this on. Well, if I throw something on, you'll definitely know I threw it on. I don't ever throw anything on that looks like that. But please welcome Evangeline Woods.
Thank you. As Jeanette said, yes, I am from this area. My family has been here for generations. Part of it came out of Hancock County. Yeah. So I'm very, very, very proud of this area of the country, of the state rather. There's so much history here, and as a child, my great-grandfather, oh God, lived to be about 96 or 97. I know he was born in 1874, and he remembered his great-grandmother, who claims to have been stolen off the shores of Africa as a child. So that history, and in the African tradition of history, is oral. So as a child, I learned history through my great-grandfather and his tradition of the spoken history. My brothers were allowed on Saturday to go to the campus theater, and African Americans had to go up in the top floor of it. My parents were not going to allow their little princes to go up there. So my brothers were allowed to go, I was not. So in order for me to enjoy my Saturday afternoons, I was with my grandparents or my great-grandparents, and Papa is what we call my great-grandfather. My thing was Papa tell me of olden days. And it was cinematography all the way. It was better than any movie I sat in. And he told us basically of the family history. But the one theme in that history was compassion. And I checked with Funk and Wagnalls, Webster, Oxford, and their basic definition for compassion is concern for suffering and misfortunes of others. But the biblical definition is based upon the Latin root meaning to suffer with. To recognize the suffering of others, but the difference is then to take action to help. That is your responsibility as humanity. I've always felt that. And to tell you a little bit of the stories, Sally Ellis Davis, if you're familiar with it, there was a middle school named Well, Sally Ellis Davis was my great-grandmother's sister. And she was the first person to teach school in Baldwin County with a college degree. She studied at the AU Center under Du Bois. She also did further studies at Tuskegee with Booker T. Washington and George Washington Carver. But the compassion in her life was that there were African American children that could not get an education in this county. There were evidently in their areas of the counties, there were no school facilities. So she opened her home. My mother says, as children, when they would go to Aunt Sally's house, she has, and if anyone's been in the house as a part of the campus now, there's this wide hallway that goes down the center of her house, and there were beds aligned beside that wall for students who lived in the country who had no other way to get an education but to come and live with her. Okay? Also, brother to my great-grandmother was Joe Ingram. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the hospital, but any history of the hospital talks about, Central State Hospital, talks about the unofficial superintendent of that hospital for 50 years. He ran the hospital. And as a little child, I was very young, but I remember him being the most gentle, elegant man that I ever knew. His hair was a shock of white. And I can remember as a child knowing that when you went to Uncle Joe's house, that there was nothing but love. And I remember about 3 days before he died, and I couldn't have been more than 4 or 5, maybe 5 years old. And we went to his house, and my mother walked into their living room, and she went to a corner of that living room wall, and down on it was this little drawing and writing. And she told me, she said, your sister did that years ago. My sister was killed by a drunk driver at 6 years old. But my Uncle Joe would not allow the painters to paint over this spot. But I can remember walking from there and walking in his room and just seeing a halo, a light. And I guess as children, you're more sensitive to that kind of thing. But I also knew it was the compassion that he held. Now, my great-grandmother, my mother, and her siblings were all born in Washington, D.C. My grandmother had moved to Washington and married a fellow from my great-grandfather, Alan, from this area, but they had lived and they married here and moved to D.C. And he was a chef, and he worked at a major hotel in D.C., and they lived a very bourgeois life for African Americans in that time. And in fact, Duke Ellington was a neighbor, his family in D.C. And then the Depression hit, and they had to move back in order to survive. They were landowners, they could always live off the land, so they moved back down here. But my mother would talk about how during the Depression, they were little kids, and how people would just walk the road. They had no food, they had no homes. Well, my great-grandmother, when she cooked, as most Southerners do, you cooked enough for the community, most times. There was always something that she had, and I can remember her wood stove and the Dutch oven above it. She kept jams and preserves. She kept biscuits, always biscuits, and then they had strychnine and all of this, stuff. So she kept some because she knew that people were going to be walking through begging for food, and she could give them that. She kept a special spigot because she was a germophobic. She boiled everything and washed everything. But she kept a special scoop at the well for people who traveled and wanted something to drink. She made sure there was something to eat. My father was a contractor here, a bricklayer, masonry contractor. He built the post office. What's now BB&T used to be Milledgeville Banking Company when I was a child. He laid that marble there. They were going to send to Italy for stone setters. And my father, who had studied stone setting in Elmira, New York, through Italians, said, no, I can set that stone, and did so. Okay? But I can go places here at Milledgeville, and guys will come up to me and say, do you remember me? I laid bricks because of your dad. I learned a trade because of your father. There are kids that come up to me and say, the only family life I ever knew about was because your dad took us home with him. We as a family always knew there was going to be somebody extra at the house on a holiday or at some point in time. My daddy was like the Pied Piper with kids, you know, and it was because he grew up on River Hill. If anybody know about River Hill, okay, that's where you come across the bridge coming into Milledgeville. River Hill and Hambrand Bottoms were the worst neighborhoods. You had to be tough to go there. And my father was African American, but my father was blonde hair, blue eyed. Okay? But he was African American. Can you imagine him every day on River Hill? He had to fight every day. But his best friend was this color, Nat Veal. And that family, my family was not the only one. Nat Veal's family, my dad's best friend, the Veals, out of about what, Sandra, about 13, 14 kids, I think every one of them got a college education because they reached back and pulled the next one with them. Okay? Where is that compassion? That you care enough and you tell everybody, oh, I'm Christian, I'm Christian. You're not Christian until you live it. You're not Christian until you live it. I look at this election, boy, have I stayed in fetal position for a week. Because it seemed as if all hope was destroyed. Everything I heard was negative. No compassion. No compassion. No compassion. You couldn't be compassionate about a Muslim mother and father who lost a son to this country. You must attack a union leader who tells the truth about a company. I'm not being political, but I'm saying that we pick up on what is put out there. I want you to know that there's still some compassion here. You think about it over this holiday season and this year to come. And I don't care what your religion is. I don't go to church every Sunday. You know? I have my own thoughts about God, and it comes from what I've been shown and what I see. Okay? There are people that I care about. And I can go on about it. I'll say things to people in the family. Oh, I've got this to do and I'm doing this. And they say, oh, I had no idea you were involved or that you could, you know. Well, it doesn't always have to be spoken. Let's act it. Let's move on it. Let's move on what we truly hold dear to us. And that's my story.
Van's brother Richard and my husband Alan Waddell are best friends. And And we are often those extra people at the 4th of July, at Christmas, at Thanksgiving. What a wonderful, loving family. Now, when I decided that when my husband asked me to marry him, Van's brother was one of the people I asked. Because I didn't know any of his family. I was like, I don't know about him. I need to get a second opinion. And Richard said, he's a stand-up guy. And he has turned out to be that way. So Van, when you get a chance, thank Richard for it. Our next storyteller, oh, there he is. Joe Wendish. Joe is such a community person. Yes. I know Joe from being a member of the Oconee Area Citizen Advocacy Board of Directors, and now he's on the Board of Directors of Allied Arts. And you know, one thing that I've really come to appreciate about Joe, one, he speaks his mind. And the other thing that I've come to generally appreciate about him is that he's always willing to be helpful. And so Joe is going to share a story very similar to the ones that we've heard already. And that's finding common ground. Joe Wendish.
Thank you, Jeanette, and thank you, fellow storytellers. And Evangeline, I have to comment that I'm very moved. The show On the Media did a 5-part series on poverty in America, and it's very clear that in America we've decided that we're fine with poverty. What we hear about is helping the middle class. We can't have the middle class, but do we hear anything about poverty since the failed war on poverty? But at least there was an attempt. But one of the things in that show that they said is there was a study on people, on empathy and compassion. And people who felt empathy, they felt bad. They felt bad. But people who felt compassion, they didn't feel so bad. They took action. And so your story was really kind of right on target with that. I have to read my story.
Okay.
And you're all such good storytellers, and Jeanette said I was. Thank you.
You are.
But I couldn't trust. Because as late as yesterday, I couldn't tell you what the story was. And so it's not finding common ground, it's hearing one another.
Okay.
And that was, we sat together and she said, here's
That's
one
what you
another.
started with.
And it was, but you know, like, what is this story? So you can tell me at the end because I'm not sure I know. Oh. But it is about me and my mother. And these are some paintings from my mother. Let me put that one this way. I mean, anyway. I'm totally deaf in my right ear. Recently, on a sunny, still warm day, I sat for tests in the fluorescent light of a windowless cubicle at the audiologist over at the Columbia Center. I knew there wasn't likely to be any change, but thought maybe I had been hearing something in that ear, so I expected a non-event, but I hoped for improvement. And indeed, as expected, she told me my hearing was unchanged. The problem, she said, is that my ability to understand language is deteriorating. My ability to understand language is deteriorating. It rang true, even as I struggled to understand it. So, there's now a way to slow that deterioration, she told me. A hearing aid that puts a mic in my deaf ear and it transmits sound to the good ear. Better yet, with a millisecond delay and brain elasticity, I'll learn to distinguish which sounds are coming from each side. I sat there confused. Would I grow dependent on hearing aids like reading glasses? She explained that it's the opposite of reading glasses. With hearing, your brain processes the sound. And so by giving it more sounds, it'll learn to grow and understand language better. still don't understand it, but I decided the holidays would be as good a time as any to give them a try. I got them the Friday before Thanksgiving. I grew up in Harrisburg, PA. That gives me a little kick for my love that we have a vibrant Harrisburg community here. When I was growing up, Harrisburg, the capital of Pennsylvania, was a town about the size and feel of Macon. I ran away from home at 17. I jumped out my bedroom window and hitchhiked out as Hurricane Agnes approached. I would not see my family again for 5 years. I came out as gay at 18, something my family has struggled to accept to this day. So I had, and I still have, a difficult relationship with my family. I know many of us do, and one of the ways I've come to manage mine is that I don't go home for the holiday. I stay here at my home with family and friends for Christmas. But for the past few years, I do go to Harrisburg for Thanksgiving. So this year I drove north on the worst traffic day of the year, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. 12 hours in the car fighting traffic with road food and rest stop coffee, all the while fretting about the hearing aids. My fingers don't work, so they're too clumsy to get them in my ears. I can't change the batteries. I can't tell if they're working or not. So I arrived safely at my niece's house at 9 p.m. Christina and her husband Dave were playing cards in the kitchen with my mother. Now my relationship with my mother is especially fraught. Born when she was just 19, I should have been her favorite child. Who knew?
You're ours.
Her dream was to be a Rockette on the Radio City Music Hall stage, and I lived a version of that dream for her as a filmmaker in New York City for 28 years. But my mother also believes she could have done something different while raising me to keep me from that worst of all abominable sins, being gay. And I know that because that's what she told me when I went home to tell her I was gay 5 years after running away. Leaning on her bedroom dresser as she laid in bed talking through the night until dawn, she told me her 23-year-old fey gay son every mistake she made raising me. To this day, she'll cop to anything. Beatings, giving away my dog, grilling and feeding me my pet chicken. And now, memories fade. I'm not sure what's true and what's not. My mother had a hard life, 4 kids in 5 years, poor and trapped in a rented house in sooty Empot, Pennsylvania, a hard walk up the steep hill from Skilton, where she bought the white bread, peanut butter, marshmallow, and jelly that was a childhood staple. My traveling salesman father was usually absent on the road with the only car. The neighborhood was old even then, no one her age, so no friends. If only there had been the internet, not even cable TV. I was the oldest and bore the brutal brunt of her torment. I couldn't. Who the hell knew this was? I couldn't save her then, but I tried. Now here at my niece's Hershey home, she had waited for me to arrive. The card game stalled, 3 turkeys sat ready to go in the oven as we looked at videos of Abby's dance recital. Mom said she's quitting art lessons, Andrew playing kung fu, Dave got a beer. I was still focused on hearing aids. My mom has them. Do you like them? Do they work? Do you have trouble getting them in? No, she said, pulling them out, showing them to me, then right there, blip, she popped it right back in. She had just been to her audiologist, a young guy, she said, really helpful and oh so very handsome he was, she chuckled. The next Thanksgiving Day morning, I had far less trouble putting my hearing aids in, if if she can do it, so can I. And they seemed to work okay that day. The turkey was good, the day uneventful. My sister and I planned Black Friday lunch with my mother. That morning, Betty Jane, my sister, called jubilant. Everyone had rushed right by the 65-inch smart TVs at Target, marked down to $250, assuming it was too late to get one. They'd all been sold. All my sister had to do was ask, and she got one, a successful Black Friday haul. She was going to take it home, then call me. I'd pick up my mother, and we'd go out for lunch. But just a minute or two later, she called back panicked and told me I had to get over there right away. Mom was being hacked. What? I reacted both annoyed and skeptical. How would my sister know that my mother was being hacked? How could my mother be so stupid as to be hacked? She's a smart woman. She just willfully wants to make drama. Still, I went right away, walked into my childhood home, into the bedroom that I had jumped from, which had been turned into her office many years ago. And there she sat, befuddled on the phone, a huge image of a check on the screen. She had already typed in the routing number and was about to type in the account number, which would unlock her life savings. It's Brian from Microsoft, she told me. He says I have 13 viruses. My sister came and we spent the rest of the day on the phone and visiting bank branches trying to close and change my mother's bank accounts and credit cards. She had given the guy one account number and her social security number. We called the police. The guy had given his phone number. We checked and it was really his phone number, but the police couldn't do anything. No crime had been committed. The guy got nothing from her this time, but he's still out there getting from others. Nothing the police could do. Now, there's no way I can convey to you the mush of feelings that came over me. That night, I tossed and turned and went over all of my mind. Last Thanksgiving, 1 year prior, my mother had been scammed by a caller claiming to be my nephew. He was in an accident and needed cash. On her third trip to buy cash cards at the CVS, the cashier warned my mother that this wasn't right. She got that third cash card, gave the money away, and only then realized the cashier was right. A few weeks back, she clicked on an ad for free hand cream, then saw the $4.95 shipping charge and thought, okay. Then there was a $19.95 charge, and another, and the phone rang, and the bank said her credit card was being fraudulently used. And then it dawned on me. Her ability to understand language was deteriorating. I took my hearing aid out because I was having so much trouble understanding the guy from Microsoft, she told me. At breakfast that next day, in a noisy diner off the square in Lingelstown with my mother's paintings hanging for sale on the walls and the family all sitting around, I looked my mother in the eye and said, Mom, only you and me will understand this. I think the problem is your ability to understand language is deteriorating. You remember your passwords and account numbers and you take care of your bills. She said, but that's because I've been doing it so long. I said, people who have Alzheimer's can't do that, Mom, but that's not your problem. This is. Don't quit your art classes. Don't stop going out with your friends. You need to do that for your brain elasticity. That day we went to Costco together to buy an iPad. Less chance of pop-up scams in the safety of the app environment. I told my mother to pay for it and to pay full price. It may sound ungenerous at the holiday, but I wanted her to have the power to take care of herself. Easy for me to say, I'm not in the will, but I'd rather she spend all of her money on herself and never be scammed again going after some sale. I spent the afternoon on the couch with her, setting up the iPad and showing her how it works. Only as I left did I realize that this was the most time I had spent with my mother, maybe in my entire adult life. The next day, Sunday, I drove home to Milledgeville, sitting dead stopped in Virginia traffic where I-81 meets I-77, not too far from the North Carolina border. My mother called. Costco had the iPad on sale on Wednesday for $100 less than I paid. I went in, but they won't give me the sale price. should say.